Anon, the long-distance lover. I met my first love at 11 years old when I was living in the Philippines. We got together at 12, but then broke up when my family moved to Ireland. At 15, we wrote letters to each other and got back together again and stayed together for the next 5 years. Not a happy ending, though. He ended up cheating on me. I also have to add that I wasn't allowed to have a boyfriend because my parents were very strict, so it was a lot of sneaking around and asking my cousins for help so we could meet up. Danielle, the check yes or no. My first love was a boy named John in elementary school. I thought he was the cutest boy in all of the 5th grade. I would try to play with him through recess and talk to him in class, but he just wouldn't give me the time of the day. One day, I was brave enough to write him a letter, literally a Dear John letter. I asked one of his friends if they could give it to him and they did. I remember standing on the other side of the playground, waiting for him to read the letter, and I watched him take the letter and throw it in the garbage. I was devastated. My little 11-year-old heart was broken and I vowed to never speak or look at him ever again. Roughly 10 years later, a group of us contacted each other on Facebook and decided to meet up for a reunion. I saw John again for the first time after nearly a decade and we made up for lost time, catching up with each other and what we had been up to after high school. We dated briefly after that, but it didn't work out. We were both in different places mentally. Although we are both parents now and just Facebook friends, I still consider him my first love and my first heartbreak. Megan, the brace-locking romance. My first love was this boy Josh who dated all my friends. It was a very Pen 15 situation. Finally, it was my turn to be his girlfriend. So, one night when my father was sleeping, we snuck out to the roof of my apartment building and kissed. It was my first kiss. Of course, being that we were both 13 years old, when we kissed our braces locked and we couldn't separate ourselves from each other. We were stuck together. By the time we separated, my dad and the super busted us on the rooftop. I was grounded for a week, but still snuck phone calls to my first love in the bathroom at night and sat with him at lunch until he dated someone else. I knew because he sent her a note in homeroom. Young love is hard. Lisa, the short king. My first love was named Joey, and he lived around the corner from me. We grew up together and we always had a mutual flirtation. When we started middle school, he asked me out on a date. Finally. I had a growth spurt really early on and by the time I was 13, I was really tall. He hadn't had his yet, and was 4 inches shorter than me. But that didn't matter to me. When we went out on our first date, the usher made me buy an adult movie ticket for myself and a child ticket for him. Now, the reason why they made me buy the ticket is because they thought that I was his mother or older sibling because I was so much taller than him. Anyway, I was totally humiliated because it ruined the vibe. But, that didn't stop us from dating for the next 2 years. Alicia, the spoiled salad love. I had a date with my crush in junior high school. We were going to hang out at the local arcade. Before I went, I was eating dinner with my family and I shook a container of salad dressing and the whole thing exploded all over my hair and my outfit. I tried to shower and change my clothes, but I still smelled like Italian salad dressing. The whole time we were out he was asking me if I smelled what he was smelling. I said no. Needless to say, we never went out again because I smelled like a salad on our first date. Jess.
Love short story. My first love. I was just 13 years old when I fell in love with a boy 4 or 5 years older than me. It was the most ecstatic feeling and I still cannot get over it. As they say, when a woman falls in love, she can never fall in love again, although I was a teenager then, but I still have vivid memories of that boy and how I felt for him. I was a smart, bubbly and a cute little teenager, who enjoyed life and was living life to the fullest, when suddenly life changed for me. I had set my eyes on him the first time when he had come to the Colony Park and he was chatting with his friends. I found him so handsome, his curly, dark brown hair and large dark brown eyes. I was floored. Though now when I look back, I laugh it off as mere infatuation, but I don't know why I felt an instant connection with him. When he looked into my eyes, my heart fluttered and I used to feel so nervous and excited at the same time. You won't believe it, but I never spoke to him. But still I felt a strong connection to him. He was so handsome and so good looking, that whenever I used to look at him I could not stop myself from staring at him, and he hardly bothered to even turn around and look at me. For him I was insignificant as I was much smaller than him, therefore he hardly even tried to take any interest in me. Each day when I used to go to the park I used to do up my hair differently and wear my best of dresses to look nice lest he spots me there, but every day he used to be so engrossed in chatting and playing with his friends that he hardly took notice of me. I was so mad after him that I used to stand in the balcony for hours on end, just to get a glimpse of him, and sometimes I used to keep peeping out of the window, so that I could see him playing in the park, but I would spot him only a few times. Rest of the times I would just sadly retreat to my studies or doing some other work. As days passed things remained the same when slowly and gradually he started noticing that I stare at him all the time, when I am around him, in the park or in any shop nearby. Once I remember I was standing in the neighborhood bakery and he suddenly walked in with his friends, probably to buy something. I turned around and as usual started staring at him, and he was standing opposite me when suddenly a lot of people came in between us, and it was a funny situation and I could see just one half of his face and I caught him staring at me with one eye. I was shocked as it was so sudden, and the depth with which he was staring at me cannot be explained in words. There was admiration and tender love in them. I then left the bakery feeling very shy. Until now I cannot forget that look of his in the bakery. Another time I felt very shy was when we both passed each other when I was coming back from school. We were walking on the side of the road and he suddenly saw me walking down the road, swaying my bag along my side. He was chatting with his friend, and when I passed him, I stopped swaying my bag and I quietly tried to pass him, and then he turned around and looked fondly at me. I walked away feeling shy and embarrassed at the same time. Anytime I came in direct contact with him and whenever he looked at me I always felt a soft tenderness in his eyes, and the warmth of his heart touched me deep inside. This boy was very tall and fair and had the loveliest hair and a very smart moustache, and whenever I looked at him I went weak in my knees. I used to dream of him being near me and talking to me and we spending time with each other, but I could never muster enough courage to ever stand in front of him and talk to him. I was too small and too naive to even think of it. Things went on in this way for a few months and nothing happened till one fine day when he smiled at me. Just imagine, my Prince Charming smiled at me. Finally he took notice of me, and I must tell you, it was the most beautiful smile I had ever seen. I was coming back from school one evening and he was sitting on his bike and waiting for his friend. He saw me coming and when I passed him he did not do anything, but when I went a little further and turned around as I heard some noise behind me and I looked at him, he smiled at me. I was too shocked to respond in any way. I turned around and went to my home. I did not know what to do, but I was mesmerized by his first smile. It was so sudden that I was at a loss of words as to what should my next step be, but fate had other plans for me. Just imagine my bad luck, that when I could think of having a relationship with him, as he had finally acknowledged my presence and smiled at me, I had to go. I had to leave the city for good. My father was transferred to another town and I had to leave the very next day. I had to travel all alone, as my father had arranged for school admissions in that town, and so I had to leave. I could have had a beautiful relationship with this boy whose name also I did not know. I don't know till now whether it was love at first sight with him or was it infatuation, but one thing I must say, and that is, that I will never forget him ever and all that I felt for him. Certainly it was my first love, whether it was infatuation or not I don't know. But it was my first experience of any exposure to the opposite sex, and you won't believe it that I could never like any other person ever in my life after that, other than my husband. First love is like a fresh blooming flower in the morning sunlight. It is like the first most memorable fragrance you might have smelt in your entire life. It is the most wonderful feeling anyone can ever have, and those of you who are reading this story might feel that I am crazy as I am calling my first crush to be my first love. But only I know how I felt when I was around him and when he looked into my eyes. It was the most ultimate feeling I have ever had in my life. It is unforgettable and I still cherish those tender feelings I had for him. All of those among who have such first loves or crushes as mine will very well understand what I am talking about, and when their love does not reach any culmination then they will also feel the same way that I am feeling. Whenever I feel very lonely and lost I think of him and I ask God that why he did not unite me with him. Why am I subjected to such misery of losing my love at such a tender age? Although I am happy in my present life, but when I think of him I cannot console myself. Anyways, those are ways of God, no one can question them, but again I want to reiterate that that was my first love and I will never forget it ever. End.
Unexpected end to a short story. Knowing very well that Chandani was affected with heart problems, great care was taken to break the news of her husband, Slok's death, as softly as possible by her sister Nina. Nina uttered the news in broken sentences, camouflaging the hints in a half-concealed manner. Chandani, you know what? Be calm and brave, my dear little sis. Slok is not in our midst now, told Nina, hugging her sister tightly. Nidin, Chandani's husband's friend, the bearer of this tragic news, was also there trying to console and provide support to Chandani. News of an accident which had happened in the wee hours of today morning near the outskirts of Pune was flashed as breaking news over the TV a couple of hours ago. Slok's name was seen at the top of the list of those killed in the accident. Shocked on seeing the news, it was Nidin who had gone to the nearby newspaper office to doubly confirm the news. He hurried to prevent any less considerate and less assiduous friend to be the bearer of this sad message to Chandani, for whom he had a special sisterly affection. Chandani did not receive the news, as did several other women with an immobilized inability to accept its gravity. No, not my Slok, so saying Chandani broke down at once, with instantaneous and wild abandonment in Nina's arms. With the storm of grief having subsided gradually, Chandani slowly climbed the stairs leading to her room, and it was clear from her body language that she would be like to be left alone and have no one follow her. Please leave me alone, she implored, and burst out suddenly, why has this happened to me, oh my God? She stood there in her room, staring at the wide-open window, and sank into a wide and comfortable roomy single sofa. Chandani appeared fully drained and held down by immense mental and physical fatigue that captivated her body, that seemed to engulf her soul as well. She was motionless except when a sob escaped her throat and shook her violently. She looked like a child who cries itself uncontrollably when put the child to sleep and continues this sobbing in its dreams too. All of a sudden Chandani arose as though awakened from a bad dream. She could feel the delicious breath of rain that was pervading the atmosphere. In the Patel street just opposite her house she could hear a peddler announcing his wares for sale at the top of his shrill voice. The notes of a popular Hindi song of the 1960s which someone was singing reached her ears somewhat faintly. Oh, I can now hear my favorite Lataji song waiting through the air, thought she. Hearing countless birds chirping in the nearby patch of shady trees, she felt a bit calm and composed. Through the large window could be seen patches of blue sky scattered here and there wafting through the passing clouds. Chandani, the young fair lady, was one who wore a calm face, the lines of which bespoke suppression and some toughness as well. The face had a different expression now, as there was this dull stare that shone in her eyes, whose gaze was concentrated far away towards one of the patches in the clear blue sky. It was not a glance of reflection, but rather indicated a suspension of astute and brilliant thought. Her intuition could sense something coming towards her, and she waited for it with abated breath. What could it be? She just could not understand. She did not know, it was too indistinctive and evasive to define. But she could feel it creeping through the sky, coming towards her through the various sounds, fragrances, and colors which engulfed the air. Her chest rose and fell vociferously. She started becoming conscious of the unknown that was advancing towards her to take control of her, and she strived hard to resist this force with her resolve, which proved to be as vulnerable as her two white lean hands. Finally, when she abandoned herself, a small whisper word escaped her somewhat parted lips. She repeatedly pronounced the word in a soft tone, I am free, free, free. The empty stare and the terrified look that had followed it disappeared from her eyes, and they appeared to be bright and zestful now. She could hear her pulse beating fast and the blood racing through her body, which warmed and eased her entire body. She did not once question herself as to whether or not it was this beastly joy which held her. A plain and rhapsodic perception made her dismiss this suggestion as insignificant. Yes, she was totally aware that she would weep and break down once she seized the masculine hands of Slok folded in death, the face that had never glanced, save with loving and tender eyes, but which many a time cast a gray and dead stare at her. But beyond all this disgruntled moment, she could visualize a long procession of future years that would be solely hers. With open arms she was all set to welcome this freedom which she felt was missing during her years wedded to Slok. Yes, she would just live for herself in the years to come. It was a strange feeling of apprehension and joy, and she felt butterflies in her stomach. This intention of hers, whether kind or cruel, made the act look no less a crime as she looked at it in that brief moment of luminescence. There would be no powerful imposing authority above her in that blind obstinacy with which women and men believe they have a private legal entitlement to impose upon their spouses. But, yet it could not be said that she did not love him, yes, at times. It was a love and hate relationship between them. It did not matter much now. What could this feeling of love, the baffled mystery, be, when compared to this custodian of self-declaration which she suddenly realized as the strongest urge of hers at the present moment? I am born free again. My body and soul are free, she kept repeating in a hushed tone. On the other side of the room's closed door, Nina was banging the door and kneeling, with her lips pressed against the keyhole, begging Chandani to open the door and let her in. Chandani, my dear sister, please open the door, I beg of you, little sis of mine, we want to see you. Please listen to me, we are here for you. You are our little princess. Don't torture yourself. We are worried. What is it that you are doing, Chandani Gudiya? Please, please, we want to see you. For heaven's sake, open the door and let us in. Go away, Nana Didi. Don't you worry about me. I am not going to harm myself. Be rest assured. Her thoughts were running riot. How will Nina ever understand me? Nobody can guess my feelings now. Here I am drinking in the elixir of life and enjoying my newfound freedom through the wide-open window, gazing at the wonderful azure sky. Soon her mind started racing uncontrollably over those days that were yet to come. Rainy days, summer days, and winter days, and all other types of days would be hers and hers alone. She uttered a quick prayer asking God to grant her a very long life. It was just yesterday that she thought with a shiver about the long life which she might have to live with Slock. Chandani stood up at length and opened the door, hearing her sister's entreaties, which became louder and louder. Her eyes displayed a maniacal triumph, and she carried herself involuntarily like Nike, the goddess of victory in Greek mythology. She wrapped her hands around her sister's waist and, fully leaning against Nina, both the sisters gradually descended the staircase. Nidin stood at the bottom of the staircase, totally disturbed and devastated by the recent happenings. Suddenly everyone turned their gaze towards the door. Someone was trying to open the main front door with a latch key. Who could it be? Perhaps Slock's parents or some close friend, thought they. Behold, what a sight! It was Slock who entered the house, in a crumpled t-shirt and a somewhat soiled pant. Carrying his small suitcase and an umbrella, he looked travel-stained and had obviously missed the bus by a few minutes, as the auto rickshaw in which he was traveling to catch his bus was held in heavy traffic and could not make it on time to board the bus. He looked dazed and totally unaware of the tragedy which had struck the bus which he was supposed to have boarded. He was far from the scene of the accident, and totally clueless about the tragic happening. He stood bewildered and amazed on hearing Nina's ear-piercing cry, and at Nidin's shocked look, Chandani's eyes met with that of Slock's, and suddenly she collapsed and was rushed to the nearby hospital. On admission she was pronounced dead due to cardiac arrest. Why? Is it due to the crashing of her future dreams, or the beginning of her bad times once again, or is it something else, sudden joy that proved to be a killer? It is left to the reader's imagination, E&D.